Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Kiki, and on behalf of Caresoft Technology Corporation, I would like to welcome you to our REI Systems webinar, Designing an Adaptable Grants Management System. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. The audio portion of this webinar can be heard through your computer speakers, or if you prefer, you can use the dial-in displayed on the screen listed through your telephone. All lines have been muted to reduce any background noise. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat pod on the left side of your screen, and we will do our best to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your questions, our team will certainly follow up with you offline. To tell you a bit about Caresoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, local, and education customers. Caresoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please do not hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's presentation. Jada Briegel, Chief Information Officer at Legal Services Corporation. Lynn Jennings, Vice President of Grants Management at Legal Services Corporation, and Wagish Bhartia, Senior Director at REI Systems. With that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Wagish.
So since it's about the Legal Services Corporation, I'm just going to kick it off. So for those of you who haven't heard of us, the Legal Services Corporation is the nation's largest funder of civil legal aid with the mission of promoting equal access to justice. So when I talk about civil legal aid, we generally think of the nation's court system in the criminal law aspect. That is where the accused is entitled to a court-appointed attorney, and if the accused cannot afford one, then they are given one. But in civil law, neither party is entitled to an attorney, meaning you can have your children taken away from you, your house foreclosed on, or be evicted from your apartment without the aid of an attorney. So we fund civil legal aid. As mentioned on the slide, we are an independent 501c3 nonprofit corporation. However, we're kind of a hybrid organization in that we are an independent 501c3, but yet we were created by an act of Congress and received an annual congressional appropriation. We're very similar in the way of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Our annual appropriations vary, but in FY 2020, we received an appropriation of $440 million, and we generally distribute we gave out $420 million in grants last year. $402 million was in a basic field grant, which is our largest of our 8 grant programs, and that is given out by formula. Jada, if you could go to the third slide, please. Just to give you an overview of who we fund and what they do, we have a universe of 132 grantees. All are nonprofit law firms with representation in every state and U.S. territories. Our grantees represent low-income people, 125% of the federal poverty level or below, in areas of domestic violence, eviction, income maintenance, and disability law. In 2018, our grantees provided services to more than 1.8 million households, closing more than 743,000 cases in civil legal areas across the country. And so with that snapshot, I'm going to hand it back to Wagish, who's going to administer a question to you all.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. So we want to make this session as interactive as possible. Please do pop in your questions in the Q&A box as we're going through. To the extent we can engage during the conversation, that would be fantastic. We want to put the first poll question up now, and if you could just select the answer that's most resonates with you, and we'll give about 20 seconds to do so. What do you hope to learn from the webinar today? understanding LSC's journey over the course of not so successful to more successful, designing a grants management process, understanding the approach to use to select a partner, and understanding what they're doing in the face of COVID-19. All right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, Kiki, you want to bring up the responses? So it looks like the majority of the folks, about 73% of folks, are interested in redesigning grants management processes in a changing world, which we find ourselves in today, which is great. We'll touch on that head on. And if there's specific questions you have for the legal services folks, please do ask them. And then a handful of folks are also interested in everything, the journey, the approach to vendor selection, and then what's happening in the context of our current state with COVID-19. Great, perfect. We'll use that as our guide for how to engage with you all going forward. Thanks. Lynn, you want to take it back?
Oh, I thought this was Jada's slide. Sorry. So where I'm going to walk you through now
Lynn,
is,
I can go ahead, sorry. Yep, so let's talk about our vision for grants management. When I got to LSC, I realized that our grants management has worked because we have a lot of really smart people who do whatever it takes to get their jobs done, and so they've cobbled together all these tools to make it work. Internally, our staff has information in at least 5 different systems. We have a legacy grants management system. We have some information in Salesforce. We have an old database that people like to use. There's stuff in Box, and there's also stuff in Smartsheet. And that's all I know of. And then our grantees, we have had them log into many different systems depending on what grant they were interested in applying for or which report they needed to support. They had to log into a different system. And so when we thought about our future state, we really want all of our grants management data in Grantees, which is the name we came up with for our grants management system. And we really only want our grantees logging into one system. We talk about our system being grantee-centric, and having integrated set of tools, being easy to use, and being a single source of truth. And there's one more thing that's not on this slide that's really important to us, which is we really wanted to have an integration with our accounting system so we could cut out some of that emailing back and forth about the grant processes.
Okay,
all
so
right,
now
Lynn.
I get to engage in a little PTSD here and take us back to how we got started. So when I first arrived at LSC 8 years ago, my charge, along with many of my colleagues, was to close out recommendations from 3 GAO reports and from our own board's Fiscal Oversight Task Force. Many of those recommendations related to improving our grants management and oversight processes. I started at LSC during the beginning of our competition cycle, and I immediately got the sense that we needed a new grants management system when representatives from OIT said that it would take 2 weeks for them to build an approval page for my reviews. I thought that a system in 2012 would probably just be to assign those roles and responsibilities to me, but that was not the case. LSC had built a highly customized, rigid system that was difficult to change. So part of the recommendations was to build a new system. So we had consultants come in to confirm that we needed a new system and to help us with the selection process. Working with OIT, they put together an RFP for a new system that had 800 requirements. A group of at least 15 staff sat through day-long demos during the summer of 2015. And at the end of that, a vendor was selected where we would build a customized new grants management system on the Salesforce platform. Without any agile training for the staff, we started working in September 2015 and unfortunately, we did not have a dedicated program manager for the project. I was the executive sponsor, and other than OIT staff, we had about 3 other staff members who devoted significant time to building a new system. We would get regular updates, but it wasn't until May of 2016 when we first started to see that a product was being developed. And when we finally saw some of the product, it appeared that the vendor was just cutting and pasting our existing GMS onto a new platform, even the same look and feel, not what we were expecting. It didn't seem like we were getting much for our money, but it appeared that we were draining our budget at a rapid rate. Needless to say, the alarm bells were going off, and so when it became apparent that we were not getting what we needed, myself and our chief of staff recommended to our president that we suspend our work on the project in July and August of 2016. Although the timeline says we terminated the contract with the vendor in February 2017, we did stop development in early August of 2016. And there I wallowed in my trough of disillusionment, as you can see, until October of 2017, when Jada Briegel came to save the day. Jada?
Well, that's quite a buildup. However, so I started in October of 2017, and I needed a little bit of time to get in and understand our business and trying to understand what happened on the last try. And I also needed to come up with a plan. So we started, I started in probably March and drafted an RFP for some business process mapping. What was different this time is that we weren't going to put an old process in a new system. And I had buy-in to do that, which is a really important point. One thing that I don't think Lynn mentioned is that when they went into the old system, they had about 800 requirements that were in this really long list, and it was overwhelming. This time we had 137 requirements, and we also decided that we weren't building. We wanted an out-of-the-box solution that we could configure and could grow with us. So that was the plan. We signed the contract with the business process mapping folks in May. We hired a wonderful project manager in June of that year. And then in January through June of 2019, we did process redesign. We did to-be processes. In April, we also signed a contract with that same vendor to walk us through evaluation and selection, to do that part of the work with us. And in between April and December, we went through a very typical request for proposal process, very similar to what you would do in the federal government. And I can go into any detail if anyone has questions. We signed our contract with REI in December, and then we were at work very quickly. We have been configuring GovGrants from January through April of this year. We opened GovGrant, or we call it grantees. We opened grantees to our grantees in April. In July, we opened it for COVID reporting and for basic field grant applications. And we have since closed both of those and are going through the applications on basic field grants right now. So I think a couple differences here is we actually got Lynn product. She could see what was going on. We have our largest grant program in the system already. And the other thing that we like to say is that we're building this plane as we fly it. And I'm really lucky to have an executive sponsor and management that is okay with that, because it allows me to just keep moving. And they're flexible as well. So I think over to you, Agish, for another poll question.
Excellent. Yep. So we want to keep this as interactive as possible. We're going to load the next question. One of the key aspects that Lynn and Jada talked about as they started, and as a restart rather, was the importance of business process sort of re-engineering and redesign, which was a theme of this presentation. So the poll question for you all is, personally, as you look at your own organization, what is the single biggest obstacle your organization faces as you contemplate business process changes? And there is an option for all of the above. We'll give you about 20 seconds to go through those. There's executive buy-in, is determining whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze of actually going through the effort and drama associated with business process changes, overcoming organizational inertia. It's actually knowing what processes need to change and how to actually change them. So a variety of different things. We'll give about 10 more seconds. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and see what we have. So it seems like the most common one is knowing what to change, how to change them. So Lynn and Jada, as you talk about it, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on how best to do that. There's a scattering of all of the above, which includes organizational inertia and change management. It's really saying, hey, is it worth it for us to go down this path? Is it going to be painful? Is it going to be hard? Is it worth doing? And then executive buy-in. So all of these seem to be resonating with the audience. Hopefully we can touch on all of those and what you all did at LSC going forward. Thanks for that. We can keep going.
Thanks, Lagesh. So I think we can definitely talk about those things as we go here. We asked for feedback. When we started our business process reengineering, we asked for feedback from everybody who had been here. In one of our first sessions, what happened in version 1 in the last time they tried this that they thought was a problem. And I just want to highlight a couple. Communication was a problem, and so we have stepped up our communication game. LSC needs to be open to change so the grants management system isn't overly customized. It's really great when your stakeholders say that. There was no process mapping. We only copied the old system for the most part. They didn't understand how much time was going to be needed by staff. And I have to tell you, it's a lot of time. It's this is not a technology thing. This is a process thing. And your stakeholders have to be with you the whole time. And my gosh, they have to spend a lot of time with you. And they also, one of the other things was communicate about issues immediately. And I think this was sort of a reverberation of one of the things Lynn said before. She didn't really know that there were things going wrong until it was almost too late. And so we surfaced issues immediately. So we got to learn from what our stakeholders were saying there. And that goes right into some key lessons learned. You really have to do a lot of work. You have to allot enough time to prepare for business process reengineering in the first, before you start technology. It's not about technology, it's about process. If you take a bad process and you put it into a new system, it's still just as bad as it was. It might just take a little bit less time to get through it. And I would say that, in my view, nothing is sacred, and it's okay to look at anything and everything as you're going through the process. You can't communicate too much about the big changes coming. We had weekly updates. We give an update at every all-staff meeting. We had a naming contest, which is how we came up with the name grantees, and then we had a party to celebrate it. I even at Halloween decorated a pumpkin with our new logo. Like you just can't do too much, and I really tended on the cheesy. We made mugs. We did everything that we could think of just to make people understand this is coming, this is real, and here's what's happening. The other thing that I found, as an IT person, I've implemented a lot of systems, and I think that I'm used to it and I understand what a system does. And I realized that non-IT people, they give you a requirement and they can't visualize how that's going to work in a system. And so you really have to take that into account, and you have to think about it from that perspective and explain things that way. The close partnership between the IT department and the business sponsor is so important. The executive buy-in is important. I need to be able to have, difficult meetings with Lynn and tell her something's wrong, we did something wrong, her team isn't doing something. It's really important. The full-time project manager is what has gotten us through this. I would also say that when I look for a vendor, I don't actually look for just a vendor. I look for someone that I can be in a long-term relationship with, because we're not going to do a new grants management system anytime soon. So we're going to be with REI for as long as they can stand us, I think. And we need to have a really good relationship. And then the last thing is really plan for training and technical assistance. And this kind of goes in with communication. We have a team that does external training. I say a team. It's 2 people, but it's important. They've put up a training page. They've done 3 webinars with our grantees. They've created 12 micro-learning modules for our grantees to use if they have questions. Internally, we have a trainer. He has done 17 webinars. He has spent 44 hours on training with all of these people. And I think you just can't underestimate how important that is. And next, I just wanted to talk about the role of technology. So as a part
Jada,
of our business... Yes, go for it.
There's a question on the side. The organizational change management should be communicated once you've selected a contractor and system, correct? So Jada, I'll take that. I think it's a continuation of a process. Like once you start, we're going to build the system, things are going to be different. We need everybody involved. So it goes back to what Jada was saying about the communication. It is constant, and if you think you're doing enough, you're not. I mean, that's just it. We try to communicate as much as we can, but the change management and the training that we engage in is, we've really ramped up the training recently, but it is a constant cycle for folks, so it doesn't change. Sorry for interrupting, but
no, thank you.
There was a question.
I didn't see the question, so I'm glad you cut in there. I would add to that and say, don't just do communications when you have the technology vendor. We started doing this as soon as we thought about how we were going to do the process. And then once we got the business process folks on board, we started doing all sorts of things. And for example, and I mean, we had lots of sessions and all sorts of things. This slide shows one of them, which is these silly graphics that we started putting all over the place. Congratulations, you're expecting a new GMS. It just gets people starting to think about there's going to be a change coming. And so I would say you really can't start too early. As part of our business process reengineering sessions, we talked about digital strategy priorities, and what's on the slide is our priorities. I'd like to say also that what's great about this is it wasn't the CIO and the IT department coming in and saying, these are our priorities. This was our stakeholders sitting down and talking through it. So, you know, one of the most important things to us is to be able to use data to make decisions, to keep our staff from doing less manual and administrative tasks. We have a staff of lawyers, and they were spending a lot of time copying and pasting because our systems didn't allow them not to do that. So I just want to make sure that they can do their jobs and they can spend time doing the best part of their jobs, serving external grant holders. our grantees didn't have a place to see information that we have about them. So like they literally can't see when we make payments to them until they get the, from their bank. And in our new system, they'll be able to see all the information we have about them, when they got their payments. That is all very important to us. Stability is important to us. We're very happy to be going into the cloud and having a cloud system. While our old system was pretty stable, we had to maintain it. We had to maintain the servers. I'm really happy to outsource that. And also to enable innovation. We have new grants or have new ideas on what to do with our old grants, and we want to be able to innovate. And so we want a system that can grow and change with us. And we think we found that. So here's a little slide on how to succeed at business process reengineering from LSC's perspective. First of all, the pictures at the top are real pictures of sessions that we had. I think these were probably about our application and our basic field grant application, which Lynn will talk about in a little bit. It was kind of horrendous. We engaged as many people across the organization as we could. Everyone knew what was happening and they could have a say in the process, which was very good. It was really helpful to have someone from outside take us through the process, because they weren't as close to the process as we were, and they could point out what might look a little bit odd to us. And they also could tell us about best practices when it came to grants management, and that was really helpful. These are a couple of our workshops. We had many. I already talked about communication. We also, another really important thing is we have a steering committee. So in addition to Lynn, we have a few other people on our steering committee, and we have monthly meetings. They're not formal, but they bring together all the decision makers, and we can talk through anything that has become difficult or we need answers to. We have a couple questions. What software are you using and platforms? So we're using GovGrants. GovGrants is a system from REI, and it is based on Salesforce. And Wageesh, if you would like to give any more answer to that, I will let you.
Sure. No, I think that covers it. I'm happy to provide additional detail around the solution, and I know some folks were anticipating a demonstration. We are going to show a few screenshots, but just you can follow up after the webinar if there's interest in learning more. But the system is called GovGrants. It is a cloud-based system, and it's a full life cycle capability. And I think one of the reasons that we're working with LSC is I think there was a realization that building something from scratch is a lot of effort and potentially a lot of pain. So starting with an 80%, 90% solution helps to reaffirm some of the lessons they learned the first time around.
Okay, and then I think we have one that might be for you, Wageesh, too. Are any REI personnel in CGMS?
Right, so this is the Certified Grants Management Specialist. So we are active members in the National Grants Management Association. We present at their annual conference every year. We have a number of staff that have gone through the grants management body of knowledge training. I do not know if folks are formally certified or not, but a number of folks have gone through that training process, and it's something that we do bring to bear as part of our implementation of a system, is understanding the functionality and the business processes that are required in the grants management space, as well as, especially for those who receive federal funding, the rules, regulations, policies, and mandates that the federal government sort of puts on those that are receiving federal funding as well.
Okay, thanks, Wageesh. So what's working right now, what's left to do? We have completed our largest and most complex grant program. That's our what we call our basic field grants. Of our 420 million roughly that we give out. That's more than 400 million, so it's kind of a big deal to have that in the system. We also completed COVID reporting, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We've done one quarterly report through the system. What's left? So we have a few milestone grant programs that we're working on right now to go into the system. We do a lot of oversight on our grants, and we do reporting, and that has to go into the system. I'm happy to report that we've gotten some good feedback from our grantees, and here's a couple of them. I laughed when after we did training, one of our grantees came and said, "Can we use the system for our other grantors?" And we thought that was kind of funny. And then the feedback on top is from I think it's from our Pennsylvania grantees that said they were very happy with it. The other thing I would say is our internal staff has started using the system to review the applications that have come in, and they've been pretty happy, and they think it's pretty easy to use. And so I think that is, I take that as success. I would also just point out that this little bye-bye old GMS, hello new love, is another one of these slightly cheesy but effective things that we hung all over the building when we were allowed to be in a building and be together. And Lynn, how about if you talk about our application?
That sounds great. So thank you, Jada, for that. Just to give you a sense of what the business process reengineering looked like, is that prior to getting started, our application had 533 questions. So it had just been growing over, 40 years of oversight. And so we tried to tease out what we really needed to know in order to give, generally our formula funds are for a 3-year term, but everybody between years 2 and 3 has to submit a renewal grant. So we have a competition year grant, which is year 1, and then 2 and 3. And then we had to understand that what do we need to do to award that 3-year grant? What are those key questions that we really care about? And so we realized that what we had done over the course of decades is to really do too much oversight within that competition process. So it became a burdensome thing, and we really weren't doing the analytical work that our program counselor or program officers needed to do. So using some staff or working with some staff through a facilitated process, they went through each of the questions, and then were able to sort through what were high value, medium value, and low value questions to answer the key questions about who deserves to be funded. And we do not have a lot of turnover in our grantees. Many of our grantees have been our grantees for 40 or 50 years. So even before LSC was created, many of them are longer-term organizations than LSC. And then trying to distinguish, were they high effort, low effort, or medium effort? And if you look at the red part of that visual, it is grantees would take a lot of high effort, put in a lot of effort for a number of questions, but were of low value to us in making the decision. So, so we got rid of a lot of them. So now the questionnaire, the application is incredibly streamlined. Much of this will, some of the basic information or organizational information will transfer from year to year, which is very helpful to us. And what was most important is the one-stop shop for all of the information about a grantee, because we do have a limited universe, and we shouldn't have to go to 8 different places to find that out. So I think we're getting positive feedback because we have completely revamped that, and as a result, we are also completely revamping our approach to oversight, both in on-site visits, since we're not doing on-site visits, and in the communication that we have on a regular basis with our grantees.
Lynn, we have a question about whether this is for a grantor or a grantee. And they are a high volume grantee, some pass-through subrecipients.
So we do have subgrants that go through our system now. So we do, some of our grantees subgrant that out, and that application is also in the system. But I would say we have less than 10% of our grantees subgrant out things, but we do have to track those as well. Our Office of Inspector General pays a lot of attention to our grantees.
And we, so this system is basically for us a grantor system, as that's like our main business. We do get some grants in, but when we think about gov grants or grantees as we call it, it's grantor.
Yes, we are a grantor. We do receive grants from private organizations, but then it will be outside the system. That is only 1% of the money that we get. So this, Jada, you want to do this, or is it me?
Sure. Go ahead. You can do this one.
Well, this is what I first saw when I started. This is what our current system looks like. You can see it's rather very 1990s in its look and feel, and that is what we deal with now. And this is our login page. And this is what it is now. So I think Jada can sort of put out the highlights, but the tweets are helpful, and it's just a much cleaner feel for everybody, and it's a delight to use.
So the other thing to highlight on here is this is where our grantees log in, and they can see some of the information that is that we've been tweeting about, but they can also see what opportunities are open. Right now, I took this a couple days ago, so you could see that our FY21 basic field grant opportunity was open, and they'll see when anything else that's open. This is, I know it's hard to see this, and it's not beautiful, but it is simple, which is what we wanted. Or I should say it's not glitzy, but it is simple, which is what we wanted. So the system allowed us to do modular forms, and we were able to break apart like a form for our basic field grant, for like basic questions that we want everybody to answer, questions about intake and outreach, questions about technology, and then a couple forms that only some of our grantees have to answer. So some of our grantees service Native American service areas, and some of them service agricultural service areas. And if they do that, we need them to be able to see these other forms that we've created for them. So we really like the modularity. And to go back to the old application with the 500 plus questions, what we've gotten down to through business process reengineering is an average grantee this year only has to answer 110 questions. And next year, most of them will only have to answer about a little over 50 questions. And so we really get all the information we need. We make it easier for people to input the information, and I think everybody's just going to be happier overall. And now a little bit about COVID. Over to you, Lynn.
Okay, great. We were asked to comment on how we have handled the CARES Act money that we received. We did receive a $50 million appropriation under the CARES Act, and from that, we created two grant programs, a telework capacity grant program, and then which was $2.5 million, and then a supplemental formula grant. So we realized when everybody was going remote that not all of our grantees had enough capacity or capability to perform their work remotely. So we had a quick turnaround grant program where grantees could ask for up to $24,999, because anything more than $25,000 you have to ask for prior approval from us, and to supplement that. So we got that money out the door. We had about 110 10 programs that asked for those funds, and we got those out very quickly. And then with the remainder, once we knew how much we were going to commit in telework grants, we then just issued the rest through a formula grant because that was the fastest way to get the money out. So we used, the basis of that is the poverty population in a given service area, along with the unemployment filings for the prior 6 weeks. So we wanted to target the funds where the need was the greatest. So within a 3-week period, we were able to commit all of our CARES Act money was out the door and is being used by our grantees today. They'll be using that money to either keep attorneys hired to provide civil legal aid for those who are affected by COVID-19, or hire new counsel so that they could do that. And then, of course, the biggest thing, getting the money out the door was easy. Along with the CARES Act, there are reporting requirements related to obligation of funds, expenditure of funds, how many jobs were created and the like. The reporting requirements are for grantees who receive $150,000 or more of CARES Act funding. But at LSC, we also wanted additional information. So I talked earlier about how many cases closed there were. How are they using these funds? We want to know that. So we needed to have a separate element of reporting on this that went to all grantees regardless of the amount of COVID funds. So working with Jada and her team at OIT and our team, our programmatic and compliance teams, we brought in REI to help us in a separate sprint build the reporting module for COVID. There are 6 reporting cycles on a quarterly basis that end 9/30/2021 for the COVID funds. So we put together in a record time and working with our training and technical assistance team, got the module up and ready to go. We were a little late and didn't necessarily meet the date that is required under the PRAC or OMB, but I think we're farther ahead than most agencies in building the reporting module that we set up. And we were certainly very cognizant that it's not going to be perfect that first time around, and we just had to be comfortable with that. I am more comfortable than some of my colleagues, but I said it's not going to be perfect. We just need to get it out and see where some of the bumps in the road are. So it turns out that it went very well. We did have some bumps in the road, which we are fixing now. Not that much in terms of the module itself or the platform that it's on, but more in definitional in terms of people understanding obligated versus expended. And so we're making those changes as we move forward for the next reporting period. But I think we felt confident that we had gone the right way, because when our Office of Inspector General went over to the SIGI folks and the PRAC folks to talk about what LSC had done in terms of reporting, they said what we had done was kind of a model for them to point to. So we were very happy with that. And so, in addition, I mentioned there are other things that we're having them report on. We are having our grantees report on cases closed and cases opened during a given reporting cycle, so that we know what types of cases they're handling. And it turns out, not surprisingly, evictions and domestic violence are number 1 and 2, and so that we can report to Capitol Hill about how these funds are being used. And that is how we have handled COVID-19 and the CARES Act reporting. If a second stimulus goes through and we're fortunate enough to get another tranche of funding, I just hope that the reporting requirements don't change.
And this is our last slide. This is just a shot of our COVID reporting that we built in the system. It's amazing how much information we've received from our grantees through this reporting that's really helped us. And with that, I think I should turn it over to Wagish, because we have 13 minutes left.
Excellent. Well, that was a lot of really useful information. I think folks are commenting as to they really want a copy of these slides because it's a lot of rich content. So thanks, guys, for going through that. Please do enter in your questions in the Q&A box. We're going to a handful of sort of panel-based questions, if you can move to the next slide. And then we're going to go into Q&A. So at REI, we support a number of customers, both on the grant-making side as well as on the grant-receiving side, and we support them in the modernization journey. And when we're having these conversations, we get a number of the same types of questions. So I was hoping you guys can provide your perspective as to how you've approached these. The first one's very closely tied to the poll question we asked earlier in terms of business process reengineering. And you guys presented a framework of value to LSC versus effort to those applying for grants or your grantees. Are there other frameworks you guys use when choosing which grants process to change and how to know how to simplify it? Is there anything you would provide guidance to the folks on the presentation?
I think this is Lynn. I think it provided us an opportunity to really rethink about our entire grants management cycle. If we're changing our competition processes, then what is the implication for other elements of that grant cycle? So in terms of oversight and contact with our grantees and everything else. So it is having a cascading effect in how we do our business overall in terms of rethinking those questions. What do we want to know about the grantees? And most of all, we want to know how they're spending our dollars, how they're spending taxpayer dollars, and how well are they serving clients. And those are sort of overarching themes that we look at, and then we have been looking at how we're doing that overall. So we're doing a lot of on-site remote trips and oversight right now, and that has completely revamped our approach to that as well. And I think once we're back in the office or whatever it looks like past this pandemic, we will be doing business differently, I would say probably 80% differently overall.
So we have a couple questions in the list here. The first one is, can we see your CARES Act? I'm not sure if that means that someone wants to see the system or what we got in the CARES Act. But if you can, John E., if you can put a little more information in there, we can certainly answer your question. The next one is definitely for you, Wagish. What does REI stand for?
Sure. So it stands for reliable, effective, and innovative. Is sort of the core traits we like to bring from a technology perspective to our customers.
So John replied that he'd like to see the system, and I'd be happy to show you the system. We can certainly connect up after this, and I can do that. And then,
if I
go
can
ahead.
make a point on that too, I think what was so attractive about, having read, I think overall 25 responses to the RFP, at least for the second time around, what really made REI stand out is they had visuals about how your system would look. And I thought that is what was so helpful, particularly from a non-techie point of view. I'm very interested in what my user interface is going to look like and what's that UX experience going to be. And if I get all of the RFPs with huge, thick paragraphs that drone on and on, I need to know what it's going to look like. So I think that's something to think about if you embark on this kind of journey, something to think about.
There's one more. What is the link to apply for grants? And all of our information about our grant programs is on www.lsc.gov under our grant programs. And you can see all of the grants that we provide, and then how how to apply for them with links into grantees. Okay,
All right.
that's all, Wagi.
Okay.
The one thing is, if you're looking at a specialty grant of ours or interested in those are only for existing or discretionary grants that are non-basic field grants. All of those grants are only eligible for our existing grantees.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. So a common challenge that our conversations with both grant makers and grant receivers is around governance. And this is not governance around the grants themselves, but governance around the process of deploying a new system. Can you guys speak to how you approached governance and decision-making as part of this journey? Maybe, Lynn, you can take that first.
Go ahead, Lynn. You can start.
Well, I think Jada really commented on that, is that because we knew where our failures were, I think it was easy to say, okay, we need to set up, even though there are certain things in the Agile, certain committees in the Agile process that are part of that, those protocols, we needed to make sure that OIT and its customers were talking. And so Jada set up the governance committee. What do you call it, Jada? I forget. The
steering committee.
The steering committee, where we have meetings once a month, but also Jada and I and the program manager and our chief of staff, who's the lead, who sort of represents me at these meetings, we meet once a week to flag any problems. So there are various sort of working groups that work on a regular basis, and we have about 100 employees on the management side. We have 25 on our OIG side. So we have a good 20 to 25% of our personnel working on this any given day. And so there is constant communication, but it starts from me as the executive sponsor working with Jada and Chantel, the wonderful program manager. They play good cop, bad cop, saying you can have this, you can't have this. You know, they really navigate that very well. So it is the steering committee, and then sometimes side conversations needed to be had between me and Jada and Chantel, and then the base working group that Chantel works with, which I think is about anywhere from 5 to 7 people every day.
And I would like to add to that, before things even get to Lynn and the steering committee, in our technology group, we do a little bit of work. So if we find a requirement that's not configuration, that it's actually a customization, we work with REI to see if there's something some little tweak we could make to the process or the requirement that would make it a configuration, and then we can just go ahead and do it. And we would obviously go back to the stakeholders and say, hey, if we just do this, would it be okay? And we found that the team has been really creative with us on these, and they often have functionality that's in another part of the product that we use. You know, they move over to a different part of the product. And it's just, so we work really hard with them, first of all. And then if it's going to be a customization, Lynn always asks me, okay, Jada, well, how many hours is it going to take? And is it going to customize the system in a bad way? Because she learned from the old system that if you customize, you get out of sync with the vendor, you might not be able to upgrade. And so I often ask REI, how many hours is that going to take? Does it materially change the system? And we talk about that sort of stuff all the time, and those are important things to know and important things to answer those questions.
Great, fantastic. I had one last question, then we can go back to the Q&A. There are a few more questions popping up. You had mentioned, Jada, that the selection of a vendor is akin to a partnership, right? It's like getting married to some extent. How did you assess, and what guidance would you give to folks in assessing a long-term fit for your organization when it came to selecting a partner?
So I have to say some of it was on feeling, right? Just like getting married. I would say take the time, go through a full RFP process, request for proposal. Meet the vendors. Meet the people that you're going to work with every day. If they don't bring in the lead that you're going to be working with, make them come back with the lead, because that's the person you're going to have to work with, and you need to make sure that they seem like someone that your people that are going to work with them every day are going to be able to get along with. I mean, it's like a little dating ritual that goes beyond all of the paperwork. I think that's my best advice.
Okay, great. Do you want to handle the last couple questions that are in the Q&A?
Yeah, so,
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn. These are for you.
Well, I'll take the formula grant. Yes, our biggest grant program is a formula grant program, which we gave out $402 million in calendar year 2020. And so we have 132 grantees, and they serve a particular service area. Generally, a service area is no larger than a state, but you can have service areas in a state. So in California, we have 11 service areas and 11 grantees, and in New York we have 7, but the state of Colorado is 1 service area. And the formula for the $402 million is that service area's share of the poverty population based on an American community survey run that the Census Bureau does for us on a triennial basis. So that's how we get to our formula grant. Now, that formula lives outside of the system. We actually just talked about this week. We have an Office of Data Governance and Analysis that is responsible for the calculation, and they have it all set up in a spreadsheet, and that formula goes directly to our Office of Finance and Administration because there were some, and I'll have Jada talk to the rationale for keeping it outside of the system, but that is how we calculate that. And of course, we have validation methodologies set up for the calculation of the formula grant.
And we made a choice to keep the allocation of funds outside because it's based on complicated census data, and that can just be, I didn't want to program that into a system. It works just fine outside of a system.
Again, our funding opportunities are on our website, lsc.gov. We are currently wrapping up our applications for our calendar year 2021 cycle are in for this year. So competition is closed for this year and will not reopen until spring of 2021 for calendar year 2022. And again, if you are an existing LSC grantee and interested in one of our discretionary grants, such as we have a technology initiative grant, pro bono innovation, all of those grants are only open to existing LSC grantees.
All right, great. I'll get back to you, Kiki, to wrap us up.
Thank you, Jada, Lynn, and Wageesh for being with us this afternoon. That was a wonderful presentation. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us today. We hope this webinar has been helpful to you and your organization. If you have further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us via the information on the slide. Thank you and have a great day.